Vietnam is becoming an AI powerhouse. Now, that's quite a statement, but let's look at what justifies that statement. So, what is Jensen Huang, the head of NVIDIA, the $3.6 trillion leading AI company in the world, doing here with the Vietnamese president, very recently? And he was setting up an AI research and development center, not sales, not manufacturing, but the top of the food chain, research and development. And for that, you need one of the most skilled workforces in the world. Now, does Vietnam have that? So, looking at Vietnamese national IQ scores, now obviously IQ national scores are a little bit controversial and difficult to measure. But if you look at a number of different sources, you'll very often find Vietnam within the top 10. And that's backed up by other data such as PISA scores and other human development indicators. And it's also borne out by reality. So, for example, the US government and also the European Union to some extent, they're involved in giving funding to the Vietnamese government to train up 50,000 Vietnamese engineers in semiconductor manufacturing. So these for the advanced computer chips under the appropriately named CHIPS Act in the US. And I've met the people here doing that. So that's, again, only possible if you have one of the most skilled workforces in the world. And the overall tech scene in Vietnam is very impressive. So this is some recent Microsoft data showing that the AI usage by consumers in Vietnam is at 88%, well above the global average of 75% for knowledge workers. And that's data back from May, so that's probably even higher by now. But the overall IT scene in Vietnam is, I'd say, of global significance. I'm quite involved with the CIO community here in Vietnam. I know a number of the organizers of that. And I was at their annual summit recently and was talking with a lot of the foreign major companies, tech companies, visiting that event. And one thing the executives, visiting foreign executives, were consistently saying to me was that they'd underestimated, in a way, the significance of Vietnam. And having seen what was going on in Vietnam, it wasn't just another country. This was very important, where they would have to pay more attention and invest more into Vietnam. And of course, Vietnam has its own national champions in the tech space. So FPT is one of a big multinational company out of Vietnam, around the world providing software services. But they have an AI section which is very successful. I've met the head of that, very smart guy. And they've even got 5 of their own universities just to feed their own talent pipeline. One of those is fully AI. And of course, that whole section is just expanding all the time. And talking about Vietnamese companies going global now, I was a couple of years back, I was doing a presentation to a chamber of commerce in Mozambique in Africa. And the people in the audience said, "Oh, you're from Vietnam, or at least living in Vietnam, and you guys provide our mobile phone services." And I was like, "Really? I didn't know that." So I looked it up, and sure enough, it was Viettel, one of the big Vietnamese telecoms companies. And so Vietnam is one of the 6 countries in the world that has 5G manufacturing and deployment capability. And they run the mobile phone networks across a lot of the emerging world, actually. So competing with Chinese companies out there in Africa. And again, only possible when you have a very skilled workforce. And for research and development, Samsung a couple of years ago put their main R&D section for smartphones into Vietnam. Now, they already manufacture, I think, all of their smartphones globally in Vietnam and a number of the other electronics. Vietnam's a major high-tech manufacturing hub. But R&D is a step up again. And I was wondering, what would Samsung 2,000 or 3,000 people on smartphones do? And sure enough, they then brought out the first AI smartphone. And this was before Apple. So Vietnamese researchers beat Apple to developing the first ever AI smartphone, which is impressive. It's something the Vietnamese can be very proud of. And this brings us back to Jensen Huang, NVIDIA, and the big AI research and development facility that they're putting in Vietnam. They also do a lot with FPT and other Vietnamese players, but this is something really significant. So here he is this time with the Prime Minister. They're enjoying the Vietnamese down in one beer in a local place there in Hanoi. They look to be having fun. It's a lovely picture. I like the Christmas hats there. Very seasonal. But seriously, Vietnam, when I first came here in 30 years ago, it was truly a low-cost manufacturing hub, low-tech, low-cost. Investors came here because of cheap labor. Those days are completely gone. It's now quite the opposite. It's a middle-income country on its way, I think, undoubtedly to becoming a first world country within the very near future. And the people coming in now, like NVIDIA, it's really because it's got one of the most high-skilled workforces in the world. So in the sphere of AI, Vietnam is going to become a major, major player, which is great news. I'm very happy. They absolutely deserve it. So watch this space.